Good morning, everybody, to the thousands watching this from all over the world on Zoom, on YouTube, wherever you are. Good morning and welcome to Daf Yomi. Hooray! We've got a great show lined up for you this morning as we enter the world of Eruvin 84. So we're going to get it up for you on the screen. And we're going to do our best. It's not the easiest content, but I'll do my best. And pretty much as always, it's almost routine now, isn't it? That I never start from the page that we're actually dealing with. But we're going to start with the Mishnah on 83b, just to kind of catch people up as to what we're talking about. The chapter that we're in is all about people being able to join together for Eruvin, for the purpose of an Eruv, creating a shared Eruv. So that's the name of the chapter, Ketzad Mishtatzvin. It's all about partnership when it comes to different types of Eruvin. And so the Mishnah on 83b says as follows. Anshe Chatzer v'anshe Mirpeset. We've got a situation of people living on two different floors, or as they say in America, two different stories. So you've got residents downstairs who open up onto a courtyard, and you have residents upstairs who open up onto a mirpeset, which we often translate as a balcony, but it would be an upper corridor, an upper gallery of some description, which would then overlook the courtyard. So you've got residents who open up onto this strip of space called the mirpeset, and then you've got residents who are opening up downstairs onto a courtyard. And says the Mishnah, so you've got these residents of the chatzer, of the courtyard, and the residents of the upper balcony. They forgot to club together to make a shared Eruv space. The shared Eruv space would have allowed them to move around freely and take things from one to the other. So the Mishnah says as follows: anything which is higher than 10 handbreadths high, so items that are on a, as it says here on the screen, on a mound or a post or on some other extrusion, which is reaching higher than 10 tefachim. So anything in that space is going to fall to the domain of the upper floor. They're the ones who are going to have the access to it. Pachos mikan lechatzer, anything lower than that is going to fall to the residents of the courtyard. So far, so good. All that's telling us is, let's say that someone's left a loaf of bread or whatever on top of one of these poles or posts, and so for a resident of the upper floor to lean over and pick it up, or to lower something down onto this space which is higher than 10 tefachim, what it's telling us over there is that that space is going to be allocated and considered to be part of the Eruv of the upper balcony. The assumption here, of course, is that they've made an Eruv, they just haven't clubbed together to make an Eruv together. So chulias habor. If you've got a pit, a ditch in the courtyard, but the rim of the pit is reaching a point that is higher than 10 tefachim, then, or you've got a cellar which is a rock which is reaching 10 handbreadths high, then the Mishnah says, La mirpeset, it's going to go to the residents of the balcony. If it's lower than that, then it's going to be used by the residents of the courtyard. Asks the Mishnah, though, we have to qualify this. What are we talking about? Answers the Mishnah, bismucha. That is only when the mound, the post, the balcony, the rock, the rim of the ditch, whatever it is, that's only when it is near to the upper balcony, in which case it's convenient for them to be able to access it. But if it is detached, if it is removed, if it's too far away from the balcony, afilu gaboha yud tefachim lechatzer. And even if you've got something which is reaching 10 tefachim tall, it is going to be for the use of the residents of the chatzer. One thing that is worth reminding ourselves of, especially as it comes up a couple of times in the daf, is that if you have not made an Eruv together, even though both sets of residents might be able to access it, some with ease, some without ease, with greater difficulty, whatever it might be, you can't have a situation where both are accessing this space if you have not made an Eruv, a joint Eruv together. I hope that makes sense. So what we're trying to figure out here is, in the absence of a shared Eruv, who is going to have the access to that particular bit of space, that particular bit of property, because it can't be used by both of them. So we've said that if it's near to the balcony, then the residents of the upper level will use it, and if it's detached, if it's removed, if it's too far away for them to access it, then even if it's 10 tefachim tall, it's going to go to the residents of the courtyard. What then, should we ask, is considered to be near to the balcony? As long as it's not more than 4 tefachim, 4 handbreadths away from the reach of the people on the mirpeseh, it is going to be considered to be bed. Fast forwarding now to 4 lines up from the bottom of the page, we're going to be picking it up with a quote fundamentally from what we've been talking about, and we're going to then move forward from there into page 84. So the Mishnah quotes the Mishnah. Tanan. Anshe chatzer v'anshe mirpeseh sheshachachu v'lo eruv. You've got the residents of the courtyard, you've got the residents of the mirpeseh, and they've forgotten to make an eruv together. Kol shegavoha asar tefachim lemirpeseh pachos mikan lechatzer. So anything that is higher than 10 tefachim goes to the mirpeseh. Anything that is lower than that goes to the residents of the courtyard. Asks, says the Mishnah, Kasal Kadartach my mirpeseh. So we might have thought to ask, what do we mean when the Mishnah says balcony? And now we really pick up at the beginning of 84 over here, of Pei Daled Amud Aleph. So, my mirpeseh, what are we referring to when we say the mirpeseh? Answers the Gemara, B'nei Aliyah. It's referring to the residents of the upper floor. Umay karu la mirpeseh. So why is it calling it a balcony? Answers the Gemara, Desalki b'mirpeseh, because they go up and down by way of this balcony. So, I guess in my mind, the way that I'm picturing it is like these American motels where you can have, or hotels even, where, you know, everybody is kind of facing onto the car park or the pool or whatever it is, and you've got some people who have to go up an outside staircase to reach the mirpeseh, to reach the upper corridor, and then you've got the residents or the guests of the lower rooms who are accessing their rooms through the shared open space. So that's what I've kind of got in my head. I don't know what other people have got in their heads. Maybe I don't want to know what other people have got in their heads. But that's the way that I've been picturing this. So the kasal kiba mirpeseh, people who are accessing the doors of their properties through this upper gallery, through this mirpeseh. Alma, in which case, the Gemara infers, Kol lazer b'shilshul v'lazer b'zrika nosnin oso lazer sheb'shilshul. So, if that's the case, then the Gemara is inferring that a principle will apply that we've been seeing previously on previous pages, where if you've got a space that can be used by one set of residents by lowering objects onto it, and by another set of residents only by throwing it on top of it, only throwing to that domain. So then what we do is we grant the usage to the residents who use it by lowering, meaning we try and always, in these kinds of situations, there's a principle of granting the access to the people for whom it will be easier to have that access. So since it's easier to lower something down, put something down, than it is to have to throw it up to be able to put something on top of it. So we're going to grant the access to the people who can access it easier. So one second, let me just get myself clear. So so we're saying that so when you've got a situation of people that can lower it or people that can throw it, we give it to the people who can lower it, so this we're seeing here is in support of Shmuel, but it's a problem for Rav. It's a problem for Rav because we didn't mention something that Gemara had earlier said. So let me just get to that. One second. We said that Rav should be holding that both of them are forbidding it, and Shmuel is saying that we give it to the one for whom it is easier. So what we're saying now, by granting access to one of the residents over another, that goes against Rav's opinion. So the Gemara now says that we are going like Rav Huna with regards to a separate issue referring to people who live on a mirpeses, on an upper story, and so hachinami. So to over here, la'osan hadarim b'mirpeses. So too over here in our Mishnah, we're talking of those who live in apartments on a balcony. So so I think what we're saying is like this: we may have made an assumption that there's not actually residents backing onto this mirpeses, but what we're now defining for the sake of our Mishnah to be able to understand it as to why who gets the access and who doesn't, we are dealing with a situation of people who are actually living off these balconies. And that is why the Mishnah is granting access to the residents of the mirpeset, because it is more convenient for them. Ihachi, if that's the case. Ema Sefer, when it comes to the end of the Mishnah, where we said, Pachos Mikan Lachatzer, if it's lower than 10 tefachim, it goes to the residents of the courtyard. Amai. Why do we have a rule like that? Lazeb Pesach v'lazeb Pesachu. Once it's lower than 10 tefachim, we are seeing a situation where it is of convenient, easy access to both the upper residents and the lower residents. In which case, it should be inaccessible for both. It should be, if they're equally able to access it, then we should have our position, which would go in accordance with Rav that we haven't actually quoted today, but we quoted yesterday. But if it's accessible by both of them, then we want to say that it should be forbidden for both of them. So the Gemara helps us to understand the phrases that we're talking about. The Gemara asks, "My lachatzer." What did we mean in the Mishnah when we said that it goes to the chatzer? It means af lachatzer. It means that you would now be granting access as well to the chatzer. In which case, ushneim asurim. Since both of them have got easy access, it's going to be the halacha that both of them are now going to be forbidden for using these mounds and for using these posts, because as we said, if you've got a situation where both of them, or where neither of them have made an eruv, so since the place is accessible by both, they are both going to be forbidden from using that space. Hachinami mistavra. So the Gemara says this makes sense. Midiktani sefer, because we learn in the sefer at the end of our Mishnah. Bamed dvarim amurim. How do we qualify the statements that we've seen in the Mishnah? Bismucha, it's only when the balcony is close to the mirpes, to the space. But when the mound, the post, whatever it is too far away from the balcony, then even if it's higher than 10 tefachim, it goes to the chatzer. So the Gemara needs to qualify this as well. My lachatzer, what did we mean when we say lachatzer? Do we mean that it goes to the residents of the courtyard and not to the residents of the balcony? Or does it mean that it goes to both of the residents and then both should be forbidden from using it? So we ask for that qualification. So the Gemara says, if you want to say that it means it goes to the residents of the courtyard and it's permitted for them to use it, why should that be the case? It is a common domain. It's common to the both of them, meaning that both have got some kind of access to it. So the Gemara asks, Ela mai lechatzer, what then, how then would you interpret lechatzer? Af lechatzer shnei masurim. The Gemara here would make the same assumption again, that it's intended that both of them have got the access to it, in which case shnei masurim, in which case both of them should be forbidden from accessing and from carrying to there on Shabbos. In which case, asks the Gemara, Hachinami mai lechatzer. Here too, in the earlier part of the Mishnah, what did we mean when we said lechatzer? Af lechatzer shnei masurim shmamina. We're referring to the fact that both of them would have access, so even the residents of the courtyard would be able to access it. Shmamina is going to be forbidden. So when in this Mishnah we've been talking about who to allocate the usage to, when it's too high from the residents of the courtyard, then the residents of the upper level are going to be able to use it. But where it is now lower than that, what we're actually saying the Mishnah means is that it's accessible to both the upper and the lower residents, and because they haven't made a joint Eruv, they are both going to be forbidden from accessing it. Moving on, the Gemara now focuses on another part of the Mishnah. Tanan, chulias habor v'hasela shehin gavoyin asar lamipreses. When you've got the rim of a pit, and when you've got a cellar, this rock, which is 10 tefachim high, then the access is going to be granted to the residents of the upper level. Pachos mikan lechatzer. Lower than that, it's going to go to the chatzer. So we're going to see a similar kind of situation over here. Amar Rav Huna la'osam hadarim b'mirpeses. Rav Huna interprets this to mean that it goes to the residents of the mirpeset. So the Gemara says Teinach Sela. So that might make sense for a rock, for a cellar, because the upper level are going to find it more convenient and easy to use, because the rock will be a surface which is in line with the mirpeset, with the balcony. But bor ma'ikalamema. But why would you think this about the bor? It's going to be both of them. It's going to be difficult for both of them to be able to use. And then you're going to have a situation where you're not having easy access for the resident of the courtyard, and yet the Mishnah has said that it should go, the access should be granted to the residents of the upper courtyard. Amar Rav Yitzchak Bereid Rav Yehuda. Rav Yitzchak Bereid Rav Yehuda says, Hacha babor malea as mayim askinan. We're dealing with over here, when we talk about a bore in the Mishnah, it's not just an empty pit, it's a pit that is filled with water. And so the water level of this pit is going to be high, and it's going to be accessible for the residents of the upper courtyard. But then the Gemara asks for hachesra. Each time the residents of the upper courtyard draw water from this pit, from this bore, hachesra is going to lower the level of the liquid. So it's going to get lower and lower down, and it's going to become less and less convenient for the residents of the upper courtyard. Says the Gemara, since it is permitted to draw water from the pit when it's full, also when the water level recedes and diminishes, it's still going to be permitted. That's the answer of the Gemara. But now the Gemara challenges this. Adarabba should work on the contrary. Why doesn't it work the other way? Once it starts to be diminished, it's going to be forbidden for them to draw, because it's getting lower and lower from that 10 tefachim realm. So too, so it should be forbidden for the residents of the upper courtyard to draw the water even when it's full. Abaye therefore requalifies this. Over here in our Mishnah, we're dealing with a pit that is filled with fruits. Oh, interesting. But Hachasri though, asks the Gemara, but that's also going to go down. The more produce that you take, the more fruits that you take out of this pit, the level's going to go down, and then you have the same problem. Answers the Gemara Bativla. No, it's not just any old fruits. This is fruit which is untithed, and because it's untithed, you're not allowed to use it. So the height of the pile is always going to remain consistent, and so it's always going to remain in the convenient domain of the residents of the upper level. Dikanami, we can see this in the text itself as well. We can see this particular detail. Dikatani, dumya de sela shmamina. That we're inferring that from the example of a cellar and of a bore, and the fact that the Mishnah has carefully chosen these two examples, it means that it's going to be a pit that is somewhat similar in concept to a cellar. And since a cellar is this extremely heavy rock that can't be moved and is going to remain unchanged for the duration of Shabbos, so too this pit is also going to be a pit that is going to remain constant throughout the whole of Shabbos, and it's not going to be diminished in any way. Well, then the Gemara asks, why do I need to teach both of these different things? If you're telling me that the pit is so similar to the rock, then I'm going to be able to learn the principle and the halacha from just one of these things. I'm not going to need the other one. Answers the Gemara Tzricha. We actually do need to be taught both of them. If I would have learnt if it had taught me just the example of a rock, then I would have said that there's no need to be worried, there's no need to decree, there's no need to be concerned of the level being diminished. But with the bore, granted, we've interpreted our Mishnah to mean fruit, which is tevel and can't be accessed. But the trouble is that there might be times when it's filled with fruits that are tithed and which are fit to be eaten. And so as they get removed, it's going to diminish the height and it's going to cause a problem. Therefore, it needed to teach us both of them, both of these examples, that a cellar which is always going to remain unchanged is always going to be granted to the upper residents, and a pit which sometimes might end up being diminished, and yet our Mishnah is teaching us that it's going to be granted as access to the upper residents. Whew! Eruvin is hard. Tashma, come and hear. Going back to this dispute between Rav and Shmuel as to whether you grant access to the easier residents or whether you just say because both have access, both are going to be forbidden. We have another case. Anshe Chatzer v'Anshe Aliyah. Now this was why I was kind of wanting to get this picture clear of the upper level being a balcony and residents coming off the balcony, because this example goes as follows. You've got Anshe Chatzer, you've got residents of a courtyard, so houses opening out onto a courtyard, and then Anshe Aliyah, and then the residents of an upper floor. That would seem to be different to Amir Peset. So perhaps this is more akin to kind of just a resident of an upper floor, but not necessarily with the same kind of balcony space. But the point is that both of these residents, Sheshachu v'lo Eruvu, once again, they have forgotten to make a joint Eruv. So they might both have their own Eruvin, but they don't have a joint Eruv. So the residents of the courtyard are going to have access to anything that falls within the lower 10 tefachim of airspace. And the upper residents are going to have access to anything that falls within the upper 10 tefachim of the building. Ketzad. Let's try and understand this a little bit more. What are we talking about exactly? Says the Gemara, Ziz yotze min hakotel lamata me'asar. If you've got a protrusion that's coming out, you've got a ledge that protrudes from the side of this house, from the side of this building, and it's lower than 10 tefachim. If that's the case, then the access for this ledge is going to be granted to the residents of Lechatzer, of the courtyard. Lamala me'asara, if the ledge is protruding more than 10 tefachim high from the ground, la'aliyah, then it's going to be granted to the residents of the upper courtyard. The Gemara then says, Hadbeini Beini Asur. So the Gemara infers from this, the assumption is that anything that falls between those two spaces, so if something is 12 tefachim from the ground, but still more than 10 tefachim from the upper level, then it's going to be forbidden for both of them. So the Gemara qualifies. Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, "Hacha b'kotel tisha asa askinan." We're talking about a building which is 19 tefachim tall, which means that wherever this ledge falls, it's always going to either be in the 10 tefachim of the lower resident or within 10 tefachim of the higher resident. So the Gemara says, "V'ziz yotzeh mimenu lemata me'asara." So a ledge that protrudes lower than 10 tefachim from the ground, lazeh b'petach v'lazeh b'shilshul. So one of them is going to have easy access. The lower resident is going to have easy access. V'lazeh b'shilshul, and the higher, the upper floor is only going to have access with greater difficulty by lowering down something onto this ledge. Lamala me'asara, if it's higher than asara, if it's higher than 10 tefachim, lazeh b'pesach, then the upper resident is going to have easy access, and the lower residents can only access it in a harder way by throwing it onto this ledge. In which case, as we said, there is no space in between to have to forbid. And therefore, as we can see on our screen over here, it serves as no proof with regards to the dispute of Rav and Shmuel. So now we're going to try and resolve it in a different way, with a different proof, as we turn the page to 84b. Pei Daled Amud Beis, Tashma, another example, come in here. Another proof to try and resolve the dispute, which way it should go. Shtei Gazuz Traos, Zulam Ala Mizu. If you've got two balconies, one higher than the other. So we're dealing with a building, okay? In our minds, we have to picture the following. We have to picture something like in Venice, where you've got a building that overlooks a canal, a body of water. So you've got a wall that goes down to a body of water, and coming out of that wall, you have two balconies, Zulam ala mizu, one on an upper floor, one on a lower floor. And the Bryce that we're quoting, Asul Elyona velo Asul Tachtona. So how are they going to access water? They would do it in the following way. They would have a hole of a particular size in their balcony, and by having that hole in their balcony, that would allow them to lower a bucket through the hole, to draw water from the body of water below, and then to put it back up through the hole in their balcony. Now, in order to be able to do that on Shabbos, you would have to have constructed a partition. And by constructing a partition, you are now creating a private domain which will make it permissible to draw the water from the water below. So I hope that kind of makes sense. But if it doesn't, then one of you guys can jump in and explain it a little better. But the problem that we have is this. The water is a caramelis, if I'm not mistaken. And so if you don't construct this this partition on this balcony, then you are going to be causing yourselves all kinds of problems, which is a lovely vague way of me saying I kind of understand what I'm talking about, but not really. So the partition that they would create around this hole would enable them to draw water from the sea or the canal or whatever it is that's below them. Okay, so what our example is bringing is as follows. We've got these two balconies, one higher than the other, and the higher balcony has constructed this hole with the mechitzas, with the partitions. Velo asula tachtona, but they have not done this for the resident in the lower balcony. In which case, the Gemara tells us, Shtehen asuros ad sheyervu. They're both going to be prohibited from drawing water unless they have first established an Eruv between them. And I think they pass through each other. The picture that I have here in my book doesn't pass through each other, but That's okay. That's why I'm not understanding it. So the Gemara is telling us that until they've made an Eruv together, they're both going to not be allowed to draw water. But Amar Rav Ada bar Ahava, he okay, 1 second. So 1 second. Let's just slow this down, Nick. Slow this down. So neither resident are going to be able to draw water. They're both going to be prohibited from drawing water unless they have this Eruv between them. In which case, this Mishnah that we're quoting, this Mishnah that we seem to be quoting, seems to rule with the opinion of Rav. So this would seem to be a proof in support of Rav, who says that they should both be forbidden from drawing it. But Amar Rav Ada bar Ahava, Rav Ada bar Ahava says, that the situation that we're dealing with here is where the resident of the lower balcony draws their water from the upper balcony as well. So if we can imagine a situation where you've got these two balconies on differing levels, okay, this might, right now I'm picturing something like the fire escapes outside of New York apartment buildings, as I'm sure you all are as well. So you've got like the ladders and the staircases that run between floors. So if you can imagine something like that, where the lower guy is relying on the whole of the upper balcony to draw his water, that is why Rav Ada bar Ahava is saying that is why they are forbidden from drawing water unless they have made an Eruv, because actually it's not a case of separate residents who draw their water individually. We're actually saying that it's not approved because they rely on each other to be able to draw their water, and that is why they're both forbidden. Abaye Amar, Abaye says, Abaye says, we're dealing with a case where the two balconies are within 10 handbreadths, 10 tefachim of each other, and the way in which the Mishnah is speaking is a particular style, where we say that we don't need to teach, or we don't need to say something because it would be assumed. So what is that? Lo mibai asu latachtona velo asu le'elyone de asiri tikigon de bego yud dahadde kaimin asara nahadde. So he's saying like this, that we should read the Mishnah in the following way. There is no need, lo mibai, there is no need to say that if they make the mechitzos for the bottom one and they don't make the mechitzos for the upper one, that they're going to be forbidden because they are within 10 tefachim of each other, and asar nahadde, and they are imposing restrictions on one another, come what may. But even if you've made the partition for the upper one and you've not made it for the lower one, then then I might have said, then I might have said that since the upper person can now conveniently access water, but the lower one is going to find it harder, so we should give the access at least to the person who will find it easier. However, we learn, it comes to teach us that since they are within 10 tefachim of each other, they are going to impose restrictions on each other. So Abaye looks at this slightly differently. It's not just that the lower resident requires access to the top balcony to get his water, but it's saying that it's going to work both ways. Whichever way you look at it, since they are both relying on each other, even if one of them has and one of them hasn't, the upper one has and the upper one hasn't, or the lower one has and the upper one hasn't, they're both going to forbid each other because of the proximity and because of this issue of reliance. I can't wait till Maseches Pesachim. Kihad Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel. Like Rav Nachman said, quoting Shmuel, Gag hasamach l'reshus harabim tzarech sulam kavua lahatira. A roof which is in proximity to a public domain, you're going to need to have a fixed ladder in order to permit carrying to and from it. from which the Gemara deduces sulam kavua in, sulam arai lo. That's going to be fine if it's a fixed ladder, but it's not going to work if it is a temporary ladder. My time, is it not because again, this concept of spaces falling within 10 tefachim of each other and access being convenient for both, that it's going to then forbid and prohibit the inhabitants of this gag or the inhabitants of the public domain from being able to access the space. Whoa. What is the But then if it's got a fixed ladder, so then it's going to have permanent access. It's going to be like a proper door. Oh, and that is why. Okay, now we all get it, right? And that is why. They're going to have that access if they have the proper door. Now the question is, does this next bit go on? Yeah, this next bit is going to go too far into pei hey for us to be truly considering to be page 84. And so, reluctantly, we say, that's all for today, folks. Join us again next week on Daf Yomi, where maybe, like me, you will be counting down the weeks until there we go. We're not far, guys. Hang in there. You guys are just phenomenal. I got to say.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
I love you all.
Your best shot.
Thank
you, Rabbi.
Yeah, when we get a proper rabbi to do this, then we'll have a better time.